Hello, everybody. So, as the title says, and let's hope that everything starts streaming right when I start because it takes a few seconds to get going. So, I'm just going to make sure that we're over on YouTube. Do, 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 do. Okay, now, of course, today it's going to be slow, right? Today, there we go. Okay, awesome. And let me make sure my audio, yes, my audio is coming through. All right, excellent. So now, as the title said, I'm coming to you live from California. So, as y'all know, I do live in Texas, but we are live from California today. I am traveling for the holidays and all of that. And so I didn't, that's why last week I said I didn't know if I was going to be streaming today. And I still don't know for sure if I will stream next Saturday. So if you don't see a video next Saturday, that's because something came up. Because I am traveling and seeing family and all of that in California. And so when I told people I was going to California for Thanksgiving, a lot of people looked at me like I was crazy because of everything that's going on. And they're even now, even as I'm traveling here and even as I'm here, they're putting down new restrictions, new stay-at-home orders. So I did want to talk about lockdown round two because it is happening. It's happening here in California. It's probably going to happen in Texas. In some cases, it already is. Um, and so just talking about that and what to be prepared for that. But I kind of wanted to start with just as I was kind of putting some stuff together for today, and just kind of look, okay, what am I, I didn't know if I was going to be streaming, so I'm like, okay, what am I going to talk about? So I want to talk about this. Um, so if we can see this, uh, let me make sure that that came across. Yes, it did. Okay. If you can see this article here, this is from Dallas Morning News. And I just saw this article this morning, and it um, just I didn't believe that this picture was real. Well, because first I saw the picture and somebody was just sharing it and saying these are food lines in Texas, and I'm like, no way, there's got to be something else. It's got to be whatever. No, 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 these are food lines in Texas. This is Fair Park in Dallas, which is where they have Texas State Fair and all of that. So it's not being used right now, and so it's a place where they're um, setting up to distribute food from the food banks. And this is, they're saying thousands of vehicles, and you see this picture right here, and it's just line going on as far as you can see. And there was another angle of that just was, I don't think that it's on this article, but there was where you could just see even further these cars lined up. And so to me, when I see stuff like this, and when I see stuff like I told you with the Paris thing where people were fleeing the city and literally abandoning their cars on the highway, what that tells me is that, I mean, this is not over, right? So that, this isn't just something where, okay, 2020 was bad. 2020 was a rough year. Next year will be back to normal. No, we're not looking at that yet. And so I just want people to be prepared. I don't do this to scare people. I don't do this to make people like, I know some people are telling me like, oh, I'm stressed out and scared. And I get it. Like, I get it. It's scary. And it's important to have the perspective, and I talk about this on my channel sometimes, and I talk about it on my Tumblr sometimes, that I have the perspective looking at all of this as that this life is temporary, right? This world is temporary. This is not all there is, and that, things are going to be rough in this world. And scripture, like the Bible promises us that we are going to have tough times, not just like warns us or, oh, it might be bad. Promises. We are given a promise that is going to be tough. So, we should never be surprised when it's tough. But I say this to make sure that people are aware that we are not out of the woods, and I don't know that we will be anytime soon, and that we may see things get worse before they get better, if they get better. And that again, remember the important point is that this is all temporary, right? That this world, this life, this is all temporary, and there is something better that's afterward, right? So, not to get too fixated, too focused on this life, but to make sure that we're prepared. We do want to be prepared. We do want to be safe. I want my followers, like I want all of y'all to um, be prepared, be safe, and be able to, uh, take care of yourselves and take care of your families in these times. And so I just want to look at this. So this is in Texas, right? So we, you know, And I see this from people even still, where people are like, oh, well, Texans won't put up with all of this. Texas is gonna, do this and that and the other. And sadly, um, while there are still a lot of very independence-minded people in Texas, and I think the culture of Texas is still very largely, we're independent people. And you go out into the rural areas and the small towns, and you definitely see that. It's definitely a more like, we're going to take care of ourselves, we're self-sufficient, we're independent. You see more of that mindset out in the rural areas, but in the cities, it has really changed. So whatever your stereotype that you have of Texas is, or whatever your experience if you lived there in the past, um, the Texas today does not look like it did maybe even 20 years ago. And I didn't live in Texas 20 years ago, so I'm just going based off of what people who have been here that long have told me. And also just what I've seen in the last 10 years. I've been here about 10 years. What have I seen in that time? There's a lot. But it's definitely a shift in the mindset of people in Texas, and we have more and more people who are not, we have more and more people who are not of that mindset of we all need to be self-sufficient, we all need to be free, and we need to be able to take care of ourselves. And that what that leads to is government policies that make it harder for people to be self-sufficient. So I'm not blaming anybody who's in that food line, like, oh, you should have, no, whatever. What I'm saying is that the people who are coming to Texas, or people even sometimes in some cases who were born and raised in Texas, who adopt this mindset, who believe that it's the government's job to take care of us, that we should be dependent on the government for food, for our income, for our safety, for everything, that's the government's job to provide for us. They create a situation through legislation, through taxation, through regulation, that makes it more difficult for people to provide for themselves. And especially, we see that especially now in COVID. So with COVID, we're seeing people losing their jobs. Obviously, stock market went down. And when we say stock market went down, we don't just mean, oh, some rich people on Wall Street lost some money. I mean, people who had college funds, people who had 401ks, especially older people are really affected by that, because if you have retirement funds that are invested in the stock market and the stock market goes down and you're trying to withdraw money for your income, like, that's the thing. Is it's one thing when, it's your retirement fund, oh, it'll go down, it'll go back up, it'll, whatever. It's a very different thing when you are, oh, I'm lagging a little bit, sorry. But it's a very different thing when you are in the mode of, okay, I am retired now, I'm withdrawing from my retirement, I'm now dependent on this retirement account. And so when we talk about the stock market, we're not just talking about somebody on Wall Street, we're talking about everyday people who are investing their money for retirement. They're trying to plan ahead, and this is my point, that these policies don't just, it's not just, oh, these people are not prepared, or these people think that the government's going to take care of them. They're creating policies that affect everybody else. Their policies affect the people who are trying to be proactive, who are trying to prepare. If you are investing for your retirement, you are saving up for your kids' college fund, you're trying to be proactive and be prepared, they're making it harder for you to do that, right? And they're making it harder for you to do that and still, like, provide for your family and do all those things. And then they're like, oh, well, we're just going to wipe away your college debt. And so then everybody who scrimped and saved and worked hard to pay off their college debt, or to not have debt, or who chose to go to a trade school or something like that so that they would not have debt, we look at that and we go, wait a second, and I would count myself in that category of people who, made sacrifices in order to not be in debt. So I currently do not have college debt, even though I went to a school that is fairly expensive, not crazy expensive, but fairly pricey. And I don't have debt. And I think that's important. I think that's important that people, and even if I did still have debt, like, if I was still paying it off, I would be, like, that would be the priority, right? I'd be paying it off, be cutting back to pay it off. And I know a lot of people are doing that. People who have college debt, who are making sacrifices, who are paying off their debt, and they make sacrifices, they make changes, they don't go on vacations, that sort of thing, so that they can be debt free, so that they can be self sufficient, so that they can be independent from government and not need government handouts. And also, we say this, talk about government handouts, but, um, I understand that there's going to be situations where people need help. I just don't think the government should be doing that. I'm not saying that those people don't need help. If you're having a rough time, if you lose your job and you've exhausted whatever safety net you had, there should be community safety nets. They just shouldn't be run by the government because the government doesn't do a good job of running things like that. And for the government to run a safety net or a welfare program or whatever, they have to take money from other people who saved and prepared and did all this stuff. So what I want people to understand is when I say, when I talk about welfare or I talk about government safety nets, I'm saying I don't think that it's the government's job to do those things. It's the government's job essentially to protect our rights and protect us from outside enemies, and that's kind of it. And to kind of keep more or less keep order, but that concept of keeping order has been so twisted and abused to the point where it's like, oh well, we have to make sure that everybody is complying with everything, and it's we're so far away. We're so far away from what this country was supposed to be, and it's frustrating sometimes. But I point out this article because I want to say that as we go into round two of lockdowns, and we are going into round two of lockdowns, I want to say that that some of this stuff is going to get worse, right? And so I want people to understand that they need to still be prepared. If you've been watching my stream for a while now, or since I started streaming, you know that I've always been advocating for people to be prepared to store up food and water and supplies and things like that. To have bug out bags, to have plans. And this is the thing is you can have all the supplies in the world, but if you don't have a plan, those supplies are going to be useless to you. So it is important to have a plan for what happens. So it could be what happens when all of a sudden you lose your job. And that may be having a savings account. Having a savings account is a prepper thing, right? It's a prepper thing to have. It is prepping. We could call it a prep to have a savings account that covers at least 6 months of your living expenses. So that should be your goal. If nothing else, 6 months of living expenses. Now, the concern here is, especially right now, is what happens if, as they continue to print money and as we continue to have all these other things happen, do we start to see hyperinflation? And if we do, does that savings account start to become worthless? So still have it because you never know. Again, and the whole point of when I talk about prepping is you never know. You don't know what's going to happen. I'm never claiming to know for sure. Like I can't tell the future, right? I don't have that ability, right? Um, but I want people to think about the possibilities. What are the possibilities? What are the things that could happen? And how can you prepare for them? And how can you prepare for them in a way that if they don't happen, you're okay? And this is the thing, the sort of criticism that I have. There are some people that I see who are hardcore preppers. And they have lots and lots of preps. They have lots of supplies. They have lots of tools and gadgets and things. Um, to me, part of prepping is also understanding what happens if none of the things I'm worried about come to pass, right? If we don't have civil war, if we don't have an economic collapse, if we don't have a societal collapse, if things keep chugging along and we have some bad times, we have some good times, but we just kind of keep chugging along as we have been for a while longer, are you still going to be okay? Or have you invested everything into this idea of an economic collapse? So that's why I don't tell people to like pull all your money out and put it into whatever. Like I don't give that kind of advice because we don't know, and I don't ever want to be responsible for somebody like, oh, I pulled out all my money and I put it all in gold and silver, or I put it all in whatever else. I don't ever want to be responsible for somebody doing that and then it not ending up working out, so I do want to say that to have the caution of saying we don't know what's going to happen. And so therefore we should be prepared for multiple scenarios, right? So that may mean having some food and water stored up. And I say all this, it's like, and, people will say, well, oh, you're so worried about yourself. You're so worried about, um, storing up, hoarding food for yourself. And it's not about hoarding. It's about having a plan And it's about being prepared to be able to take care of not just yourself, but your family and other community members. Like, you're building your community. You should always be building a community, and you should be able to help your community members. And ideally, in an ideal situation, um, you have a community, whether it's your actual physical neighbors who live next door to you, it's your family and extended family, it's your friends, maybe it's your church, but you have some kind of community where people are all of a similar mindset that, hey, we should be taking care of each other. We should, and part of taking care of each other means also being prepared to take care of ourselves, because it's hard to take care of somebody else if you can't take care of yourself. And so kind of that mindset of, okay, we're going to try and be self-sufficient, but we're also going to help each other out. And I'm very thankful that the church I attend is of that mindset to a certain extent. And we have had some examples recently of some families within our church that where they've needed something, they've needed help with one thing or another. And we as a church, as members of the church, have been able to reach out and help them. Like somebody's car breaks down and they need it because they're starting a new job, the next day, and somebody lent them a car, like that sort of thing. That's where we're at, is we're taking care of each other. And I'm very, very, very happy that I live in an area and that I attend a church where we have that community. And those are the communities we need to build now. So I want to say, if you haven't formed that community and you don't know where you're going to find that community, maybe you don't have a church that you attend regularly, and you're not really plugged into that church like you attend, but you're not really part of that church community, or that community is just not, they're not on the same page with you, and you're kind of like, I'm going to freak them out if I go tell them all the things that I think, right? So if you're in that kind of situation and you don't have a community, kind of a natural existing community that's around you, what I recommend is checking out, and I have it in the description, is the Freedom Cells website. And I think I mentioned it last week, and I've mentioned it before, but I do recommend that if you're somebody who's like, I don't already have a community, there's not a community around me, how can I get plugged in somewhere? And the people who are joining Freedom Cells are people who have that prepper mindset. They have that mindset of being prepared and being self-sufficient. And the goal is to create a scenario where, let's say we have these kinds of economic collapses. Like, let's say you've got food lines in your area, and maybe you already do. Maybe there's food lines in your city, and people are, thousands of people lined up, stretching back miles for food. If you're in that situation, then you don't want to be in that line, right? You don't want to be in that line. If there's an evacuation, you don't want to be in the traffic jam, right? You don't want to be in the masses that are lined up waiting for a handout, or waiting for some kind of help from somebody, and who are dependent and who are helpless. You don't want to be in that situation if you can avoid it. Now, obviously, sometimes that's where we end up, but if you can take steps now to prepare and avoid it, that's what we should be doing. So the Freedom Cells Network is a great place to start, because you're connecting with other people in your area who have the same mindset and who may have different skills and resources. And the concept being that if we do come into some kind of scenario where, and this could be a couple of different things, it could be an economic collapse where your money is worthless, or you can't go to the store and buy things, or it could be they push out this vaccine and they make it a soft mandate where it's like they're not going to come force you to take the vaccine, but they're going to tell you can't go to the store, you can't get on an airplane, you can't do all these things unless you've had the vaccine. And that's what they're talking about right now. And if we reach that situation, you're saying, no, I'm not getting this vaccine, I don't trust it. Or even if you're just saying, I want to wait a couple of years to see how it goes before I take it, which is a reasonable thing, I think. But, even if you don't have any real skepticism about this vaccine in particular, just saying, hey, let's wait a couple of years, let's see how it goes. I'm not going to be the first in line. But if we have these soft mandates where people have to get the vaccine in order to do all these things, to go to work, what are you going to do? Are you going to take the vaccine even though you think it might be a risk? Or are you going to not be able to go to the grocery store? And so Freedom Cells gives you a third option of, I have a community of like-minded people, of people who understand my hesitancy. And in the event that I can't go to the grocery store, it may be something where, like maybe one of them did get the vaccine and they're like, I'll go to the grocery store, you pay me back, right? I'll pick stuff up for you, or just helping each other out, or maybe somebody's got a, and some of this freedom cell stuff, like a lot of people, there's people who have farms, right, or who are homesteaders, and so being able to like, oh, I'll come work on your homestead, like I'll come help you out with stuff, and you share some food with me, like, so those kinds of agreements can be set up so that you are not stuck, and it could even be from COVID if you're out of work because your business collapsed, or your business had to, your employer had to lay you off, and you're there's no food, and the food banks are overwhelmed right now, and so yeah, even if you go get in that long food line, you run the risk of there not being enough, right, or it not being what you need. And so being able to then reach out to that network and say, hey, I'm in this tough situation, and then being able to do something like trading work, like if you have a skill, if you have something you're good at, being able to trade work for food or for other supplies that you need. So I recommend that for anybody who's like, I don't have a community, I don't have this set up already. um, but do consider, if you are attending church regularly and you do have like some good friends at that church, consider talking to them and kind of figuring that out, like, hey, things are really crazy right now. I just saw this, picture of food lines in Dallas, however you want to start the conversation, but just saying like, you know, how can we as a church community come together and meet those needs of either your needs individual to you as a person, or people in your church who might be in greater need than you. And so that's, especially around Thanksgiving, it's a great time to be like, okay, who who do we have in our community, who do we have in our church who's in need, and how can we support them, how can we help them. And so this is a great time to kind of look into that. And again, freedom cells, if you don't already have a community, but consider going through your church, because I do think the churches are the best situated to be those support communities in these times. I think they're in the best position to do so, but it's just a matter of getting organized. Plane. I don't know if y'all can hear the plane. There goes the plane. All right. Um, So anyway, and I told you all this was going to be a relatively short live stream. And so just because I'm traveling and all of that, I may be back next week, but couple of last things. So freedom cells, get plugged in. Now is a great time to look into buying seeds to plant in the spring. If you have a place that you can garden, whether it's your own backyard or a friend's backyard. Honestly, this is the thing. I'm looking into this with, because I don't have the space to grow all the things I want to grow. And I'm actually looking into, my parents are considering moving, and the houses they're looking at, they would have some space. And I'm talking about making a deal with them where if they get to a place that has some space, that I can set up a garden that I take care of, and then they, because I'm using their land, they share in the harvest. So I grow things, and so this is a deal that you can make with somebody if you don't have your own land. Say, hey, you've got a nice big backyard, right? Can I have a corner of that to grow some vegetables? Which most people are like, cool, vegetable garden, that I don't have to, a lot of people want a vegetable garden, they just don't want to put in the work. So saying, hey, I'll put a vegetable garden together, and then we'll share whatever I harvest. I'm using your land, I'm putting in the labor, we share the harvest. So that can be a really great way. And because I really recommend that this spring, plant as much as you can, as much food as you can. And then if you have more food than you know what to do with, number one, canning and preserving foods are, there's lots of YouTube tutorials on how to can, ferment, dry, preserve foods. Okay, so preserve things and store them up. Number two, share them. This is huge. If you can plant a nice big vegetable garden, as much as you can, as much as you can handle, and you grow way more food than you can possibly eat, or even more food than you can possibly preserve, share it. Because not only are you helping your community, but now you're putting it in a position where you share food with them now, and then when you're in trouble, it's going to be a lot easier for them to turn around and help you. So you can look at it both ways, both just, supporting your community, but also, and in order for a support community like that to work, where people all help each other like that, everybody has to be contributing. So you want to make sure that if you're building that community as a support network for yourself, you got to make sure you're also supporting them, right? Otherwise, it doesn't work. So, so plant as much as you can in the spring, and grow as much food as you can, and then share it. So that's my kind of thing on that. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Stay safe, be prepared, and we are going to get through this. We are. Okay. And remember, it's all temporary. So thank you guys, and y'all have a great Thanksgiving, great week. Happy Thanksgiving, and I may see you next Saturday. If not, it'll be the Saturday after. So see y'all.